In this lecture, we're going to look at how we can bind the style attribute on an element. In some cases, you may want to apply stylings directly on the element. For example, let's say I wanted to change the size of the circle. There are three properties we'll need to change: the width, height, and line height. Creating a set of classes that would cover every size possible would be time-consuming. It would be much better to set the styles directly on the elements. Back in the editor, inside the data object, we're going to create a property called size. Its initial value will be set to 150. We're setting it to 150 because that's the initial value in the CSS class. Then, inside the template, below the dropdown, we're going to create an input field with the number type. We'll be dealing with numeric values. The number type will prevent the user from entering non-numeric characters into the input field. We're going to use the vModel directive once again to bind the value to this input field. We'll bind it to the size data property. The last step is to update the circle to use these values. Inside the element, we're going to bind the style attribute. We'll set this attribute to an object. Unlike before, where you're performing conditional checks, we'll be setting the CSS properties dynamically. If I want to set the circle's width, then I would add that in as a property. The value is what will be used as the CSS value. We're going to set this property to the size data property with the pixel measurement. I'll do the same for the height as well. This will make the circle nice and even. However, there is one additional property I'd like to set. In order to make the text vertically aligned, we'll need to set the line height property. If you set the line height to the same value as the height, the inner text will be aligned in the center. However, typing line height is not a valid property name. Therefore, there are two solutions we can use to add this in. The first solution is to wrap it in quotes. This solution is valid and will work. Alternatively, you can remove the quotes and camel case the name. View will detect the camel casing. It'll take care of lowercasing the word. It'll add dashes between each word. Either solution works. It's all preference in the end. I prefer to use camel casing because it's easier to read. We're already typing this inside of a string where there is no syntax highlighting. Using quotes can make things difficult to read. We'll set this property to the size data property with the pixel unit measurement. Be sure that your code matches mine. I'm going to refresh the page one more time to test the application. We'll see the input field with an initial value of 150. If I were to increase or decrease the amounts, the circle would adjust accordingly. You can open the Elements panel in the Developer Tools to view the changes in real time. This effect is cool to see. It's possible thanks to View. Similar to classes, we can use the array syntax to apply a list of stylings. Let's give it a try. Switch back to the editor. Inside the style attribute, we'll wrap this object with an array. Then, after the first object, we'll add in another object with a transform property. The value will be a basic rotation. We'll take the time to format the code. A lot is going on inside this attribute. At this point, it may be better to use a computed property. I'll leave that as an exercise for you to do. We are using two objects for applying stylings to the element. For the most part, you usually wouldn't have to do this, but it's nice to know you can pass in multiple objects for styles. Let's refresh the page to check out the result. The circle will be tilted 30 degrees. This value isn't dynamic, but it still gets the point across that you can pass in multiple objects with separate stylings if you ever need that kind of control. In the resource section of this lecture, I provide a link to the official documentation for adding classes and styles to your elements. This page goes over everything we've covered thus far. I recommend giving it a good read before moving on to the next lecture.